The NFL is no stranger to a wild narrative, but there are many different stories that have contributed to the game for better or for worse. While we could produce multiple volume sets about all the crazy stories in the NFL and its players have been involved in, here today are some of the insane stories that I feel players don't talk regularly about enough today.
Sack back at the 27-yard line, and he's got a beat. Left goes right.
Retirement, contracts, and escaping trade. A Gronkowski story. For many people, retirement is a final act. It defines a moment where individuals are praised for their contributions over their service. Lately, there has been a trend that nobody has been talking about. Certain players are manipulating contract values and using retirement to avoid trade to less than favorable situations, thus burdening their organization without value for their departure. In 2018, Rob Gronkowski had retired from the NFL, avoiding trade to, reportedly by his account later on, the Detroit Lions. By retiring, players effectively can escape devalued trade situations to leverage themselves into a situation they find more favorable. Instead of Gronk's value to be respected to his organization, he retired and after 1 year is allowed to return, rested, and for whoever he wants to play for? In this situation, playing for his old friend Tom Brady, when in most likelihood he would have been never traded to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. His trade value would have surely never allowed it. This also just happened with Julian Edelman as well. After retiring unexpectedly from the NFL 1 year ago, guess who's returning to play with his old friend Tom Brady and Rob Gronkowski? Julian Edelman, coming out of retirement 1 year later to play for whoever he wants and having it all be okay is something that everybody, not just the players, are discussing. If players are allowed to escape their contracts by simply retiring for a year while they rest and develop, knowing well they will return, I feel it's a slippery slope for the NFL and they will find that this creates a unique and unfair situation when doing roster building. Now, let's throw it way back, and then we'll meet in the middle somewhere, okay? The Green Bay Packers, Party City during probation. The Packers had a winning record every year in the 1920s, and in 1929, the opening year of the Great Depression, the team won its first of NFL-leading 13 championships. The city was popular to players and opposing teams from 1920 to 1933, yes, the Prohibition years, because, for all intents and purposes, Prohibition didn't exist in Green Bay. That's right. Former Press-Gazette business reporter Tom Murphy once said that there's a reason that the mob never got a foothold in Green Bay is because they were never bringing any product into town that people already didn't have access to. Al Capone was never able to get into Green Bay because he had nothing that they needed. A house in Green Bay during Prohibition was found to have 15,000 gallons of sour mash stored there, mash that was used for making whiskey. When the FBI tried to get involved to find some accountability in this situation, they had called the authorities in Green Bay to prepare for their arrests and the arrival. When they arrived, there was nothing to be found. Rumor has it, the loyal Packer fan switchboard ladies were informing the good people of Green Bay of the impending FBI arrivals, and the whiskey women in bars were nowhere to be found. How awesome is that? The excesses of the Roaring Twenties came to a screeching halt in October of 1929 when the stock market crash launched the decade-long Great Depression. Banks failed, businesses followed, and at its height, 25% of the population was out of work. By 1934, the other smaller cities had all lost their teams, and it could have been a dangerous time for the Packers. The team actually went into bankruptcy after losing a lawsuit to an injured fan in 1931. But a friendly court-appointed businessman, receiver, and grocery wholesaler all-around good Green Bay guy stepped up to pay the fine. That certainly would have doomed the Packers. This was said of the Depression and the lawsuit. Considering most of the small-town teams were already out of the league, the Packers somehow found a way to flourish. The Packers became the first NFL team to win 3 consecutive championships, from 1929 to 1931, and won again in 36 and 39, more than any team during that decade. Truly an amazing, thrifty little town that never needed nothing from nobody. Maybe nobody talks about it because history can be boring, but I like knowing where we come from. All right, next, Aaron Hernandez and the Florida Gators team. Aaron Hernandez is now infamous for his involvement in the murder of Odin Floyd in 2015. Hernandez went to trial for the killing of Odin Floyd in January of 15. We all know this has been facts. The trial lasted for more than 2 months. On April 15th, Hernandez was found guilty of first-degree murder, and the jury deliberated for 6 days before their decision. According to Massachusetts law, Hernandez automatically received a life sentence without the possibility of parole for his crime. But not only is Aaron Hernandez's story his own, but it is also part of a greater narrative that is quite more insane to think about. Aaron Hernandez went to college at the University of Florida. He was a Gator, coached by none other than Urban Meyer, whose latest fiasco of getting fired from the Jacksonville Jaguars in the most fantastically horrible way has now put him and his coaching practices under a microscope. Let's talk about this team for a second. Aaron Hernandez aside, there was Percy Harvin, who had multiple issues with marijuana use and scrutinized for his antics. Cam Newton, Superman, y'all, Janoris Jenkins, Joe Hayden, and all headed up by the one and only, the preacher man, Tim Tebow. The amount of drama and news surrounding this team, in hindsight, was stifling. This makes you wonder what kind of confused culture Urban Meyer was nurturing. When problems come from the top, players are bound to step away. After all, it's their expectations that the coaching staff and personnel are invested in caring about their players' development. A situation that appears here was not in their favor. Why we don't talk about what's going on in Florida in the late 2000s? Well, I guess what happens in Florida stays in Florida. All right, next, Minnesota Vikings boat sex party with Dante Culpepper. Professional players like to have all sorts of team-building exercises. Minnesota Vikings players allegedly threw a boat orgy party, renting a pair of houseboats, flying in prostitutes and strippers from Florida and Atlanta. This madness was reported to have had at least 100 people there and resulted in the firing of head coach Mike Tice for, again, his alleged knowledge about the incident. Gotta stay warm somehow in Minnesota. Yeesh. Unfortunate next. Tom Brady has more playoff wins than 27 teams. Yeah, that's about right. Ugh. Double next. Back in 1998, People magazine named Rich Gannon the sexiest athlete of the year. They dispatched a photographer to Kansas City to publicly take the photos and told the photographer that the guy to take the photos was the Kansas City quarterback. The problem was the photographer had no idea what Rich Gannon looked like. He took photos of the other Kansas City quarterback, Elvis Gerbach, who, that's right. When the magazine realized their mistake, they didn't have the heart to tell Gerbach or the time to fix it, so they left it. Gerbach reigns as the sexiest athlete of 1998 accordingly. The article's final line says it all. His personality makes him sexy. Doesn't it always? Next, Brett Favre and painkillers and personal behaviors. Hall of Fame quarterback Brett Favre said that he almost wanted to kill himself while quitting his painkiller addiction following the Packers' 1996 season, taking up to 15 Vicodin at a day at one point. That's right, everyone. 15 Vicodin is a lot of Vicodin. Favre did not magically decide to take them all at once in a day or anything. He gradually worked his way up to that total. 15 was a half a month's prescription for the painkiller, meaning Favre was not only knocking back 2 weeks worth of painkillers every single day, but he was also going around and asking teammates for pills on a frequent and awkward basis. His addiction began early in his career, and he played throughout injuries spanning from 1994 to 97, including Green Bay's 1996 Super Bowl season. The retired quarterback pinpointed the specific game when it began, against the Eagles in 1994, when he separated his shoulder. As sports fans, we need to see that these players are human. We need to see them as making mistakes. Fans eat this up. It's only human behavior that we love to see a little drama. We have a little bit of this schadenfreude in all of us that makes us want to see James Harrison bash Roger Goodell on national television, or watch T.O. pretend to cry about Tony Romo during a press conference. Fortunately for us, Brett Favre was able to get control and recover. So much of that in this chapter of his life is rarely brought up. It is true that bad news is usually more entertaining than good news, but if everyone comes out on the story alive, the objective and slightly more boring type of coverage is better than the skewed coverage only from one side of the situation. Don't you agree? As entertained as we are by the bumbles and blunders of athletes, coverage of this kind tends to cast the entirety of NFL player pool in a negative light, when a great number of them are productive and positive citizens. Flashback next! Brett Favre and Hank Hill's favorite player growing up was Roger Staubach. When Roger Staubach, Heisman winner at the time, was playing for the Navy, he used to play catch with his coach's son. The coach's son? None other than the hoodie himself. It was Bill Belichick. Extreme close-up! Whoa! Double next. After he was allowed to pick up a ring with the New England Patriots, despite being cut earlier in the season by the Cardinals for being arrested for an extreme DUI. Extreme. Receiver Michael Floyd joined the Minnesota Vikings in the offseason. Sure, there was still a matter of the house arrest, but that would all be cleared up by the start of 2017. Except he violated the terms of said house arrest when he failed 3 self-administered breathalyzer tests and slept through a 4th in early June. After that said watching movies with teammate Kyle Rudolph and drinking kombucha tea. Floyd said he was unaware the tea contained alcohol and that the team told him to drink it. He was sentenced to more than 1 day in jail, and now the Vikings can joke about this harmless mishap instead of the truly frightening drunk driving arrest that he had a year before. Is it a coincidence that the Vikings show up on this list more than once? Or the Packers? I hope not. Well, there you have it, folks. Thanks so much for watching. If you liked, please click subscribe. Click the link. Follow me. I am John Stimick, the voice, sounding off on everything all the time, signing off.